understand it's all God. This is very, very important. It's all God. It's only God. There is only God. Because if you don't really feel that, this feels way too overwhelming. I wanted to start. I think we should always, always, always focus on the positive: joy, positivity, trust. Those are our greatest arsenals. So I know we spoke last week about this amazing miracle of the soldier that somehow the IDF got out. We do not know. No, it's not that because we didn't read the update or read the news report. They're not saying, for very obvious reasons. We know, though, that there was a lot of spiritual things that were done. And then when we do enough spiritual, the physical happens. So I know we discussed last week how they'd written into the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave a very, very strong answer that they took as like resurrection of the dead. That's what they were going to see, and that in essence is what they saw. I think we mentioned the mother girl, the soldier, was released Sunday night, and the Thursday before, I think many of you saw the video clip of the mother pleading and pleading with God as she did the mitzvah, the commandment of separating the challah dough, and also that previous week how there had been a Sefer Torah dedication in their town, and how when the procession of the Sefer Torah is dedicated usually is completed, the writing in one place, and then there's a procession with a chuppah, with music, with parading, with tremendous, tremendous joy. The inauguration of a new Sefer Torah has such joy that the whole city, where there's a completion of a Sefer Torah, we do not say certain parts of the prayer, the lamentation parts of prayers. We do not say that day. It is such a joyous day. It is such a joyous event. Another Sefer Torah was written. So they took this new Torah scroll, and as they were parading from where they completed writing it to where it was going, they stopped outside her apartment building and they brought the Sefer Torah into her bedroom. They also, and I know we mentioned this a few times, mezuzahs. They changed the mezuzah in her bedroom to have a much better mezuzah. Mezuzah creates protection. It creates protection for you in your home. It takes protection for you out of your home. Any Jew, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, who puts on a mezuzah is protecting Jews. Much more so the mezuzah in your home, much more so the mezuzah in your bedroom. So they gave her a new mezuzah in her bedroom. And I saw, meaning the man who did this, he was interviewed on secular Israeli television. So this is an uncle of the soldier. And he says how he went to her house and how it was so sad. You know, she's Hamas, who knows what that means for a girl, for a soldier. He's not religious at all, but he said Psalms there. And he decided in her honor, he was going to keep that Shabbos. He was going to keep the Shabbat. And he's not religious, but he has children who are religious. So because he made that promise that he was going to do this for his niece, to give this to God, to create her release, so that Shabbos, he went to his children who are religious. So it's easier to keep the Shabbos if you're with religious people. And he stayed in their home, he ate the meals with them, and he went with them to synagogue, to their shul. And when he went to the synagogue, they honored him with an aliyah, which means they called him up to the Torah. When he was called up to the Torah, he made a special blessing, as we have the ability when we're called up to the Torah, we bring down blessings for people. So he made a blessing, what we call a mishaberach. He made a blessing for her, and he said out loud, he was committing to God, if you get her out, I commit to keep the Shabbos. That's what he said Saturday. Sunday night, she got out. He was like, oh my gosh, I didn't mean just her, God. I meant all of them, and she'd be among them. I wasn't saying get her out and not anyone else, but he kept his word. Now, this was very powerful. I know we spoke last week about this idea of the religious awakening that's happening all over. So he is being interviewed on secular Israeli television. The interviewer is bald, obviously no head covering, earrings, and he's saying his story. It's very, very, very emotional. And he says to this secular host, again, he's secular, but he made a commitment to keep the Sabbath, to get his niece out. And God got his niece out literally the next day. And he's saying to the host, he's going to keep his commitment. He's going to keep the Sabbath, but he knows it's going to be really hard, but he's going to do it. And the host says to him, oh, don't worry. It won't be hard. It'll be easy to keep the Shabbos. And it was just so amazing because, like, you think this guy is religious, which he clearly did not seem to be. But he was like, you'll keep the Shabbos. Don't worry. It's not really a big deal. It was so emotional. There was such like a sense of kinship which everyone's feeling. And here, this man is very emotionally telling his story, that at the end of the interview, the TV host said, "I'm breaking protocol." And he went over to the man and he just hugged and kissed him. As it was such a sense of kinship. Like I said, the whole city's rejoicing. We are one. This is our daughter. This is our sister. And there's a lot of love. There's a lot of unity. And there's a lot of religious awakening. In connection with this soldier, this was amazing. I don't know if anybody here saw this clip. It's from the Israeli parliament. The Israeli parliament in Hebrew is called the Knesset. So it's from the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament. And this was shortly after the soldier was released. And they were discussing in the parliament this new bill they wanted to pass, or they were discussing passing, to give support, to give aid to the families of the hostages. So this woman, Knesset member of the parliament, in proposing and discussing this law about compensation for families of hostages, she starts speaking at length about the mother of the soldier that they got out. And she's speaking about the video clip that I'm sure many of you saw, where the mother is doing the commandment of separating that challah dough, which is what we do when we make enough bread batter or a mixture of something like a bread-like substance. And it's a very special spiritual time. It's a time many people use to pray to God and to ask for many very significant things. It's considered a very, very auspicious time. And she's praying and praying and crying and pleading, and you watch it and you feel her pain. Her daughter's been 3 weeks in Hamas, begging and pleading with God to get her daughter out. And as she's crying and she's begging and she's pleading, within her words, she says, "God, I love you." And she continued her begging, her pleading, her prayers to get her daughter out from the clutches of Hamas. And this parliament member, this Knesset member, went on and on in the Knesset, in the parliament, about the power of that belief, the high level of that belief. And it's just amazing. When I was listening to it, and I've seen afterwards, I saw it when it just came out, so it was obviously in a very high level Hebrew. But I've seen afterwards, they put English subtitles, so I'm sure people have seen it because there's English subtitles translating her words. It's unbelievable. These words are not being said in a class, in a lecture, a group of friends inspiring themselves. These words are being said by a member of Likud, a completely secular party, in the Israeli parliament, all about belief in God. I'm like, wow, God, look what you got. Look where we're at. I wanted to, for a minute or two, just focus on this idea of what this mother did, that this Knesset, this parliament member, was so awed by. What do you think this means? Why do you think she said, "God, I love you"? At that moment, seemingly, she wouldn't be feeling love. She'd be feeling terror. She'd be feeling fear. Her daughter has been for almost 3 weeks. Who knows? Who knows if her daughter's alive? Who knows what they're doing to her daughter at this moment? And she says, "God, I love you." Why do you think that came out? Obviously, it wasn't a prepared speech, and obviously it was very spontaneous on her part. Why do you think that's what came out?
Maybe it's continuation of God, I trust you. You love your children, right? Like, you protect us, something maybe along those lines. I don't know what she was saying before, but
before and after. It's in the middle of her, just obviously, as I'm saying,
right.
This is the speech. This is just pouring out her prayers. It's a very holy moment. There are 3 commandments given to the Jewish woman: the laws of family purity, the lighting of the candles to welcome in the Shabbos and the holiday, and the separating of the challah. All 3 of those times are considered very, very auspicious time for prayer. So she was doing this commandment and praying to God to get her daughter out. So she's basically praying and pleading and crying. I mean, pleading, like banging on God's door to get her daughter out. And amid her words, she says, "God, I love you," which was what struck this parliament member so strongly. Like, that's what you're like, whoa, could you imagine at that moment when you're so terrified for your daughter, but you're so sincerely saying that you love God?
And I think when I watched this, I just saw mother from desperation. She yelled, she cried, very innocent. I mean, honestly, it all came from her heart. all words which she was pouring out, it was her cry to bring back her daughter, cry to God. She talked to God. She did not just say a regular prayer. It was true from heart, yelling, screaming to God, I need your help. And I think the words like I love you, I did not even found them strange. It was like, no, the way she spoke, it's almost like felt to be said, because yes, she's the only one who can help her in this situation is God, and she truly believes and she loves God and she believes God. So I heard these words, this kind of like I remembered them something, but I did not find, wow, why did she say it? It's almost like it's
felt very
normal.
organic.
Very exact. This is good verbiage. Yes, it was very organic. She said she believes, she wants, she pleaded, and she said, I love you, God, just give me back my daughter. So that's my
I think also that she, like you said, it was so organic, but she was thanking God in advance because
yes,
she
right.
her daughter is
I
going to be
agree.
released.
Yeah, I
Was
agree.
I mean, she was thanking Hashem for releasing her daughter.
I was just thinking maybe in this very, very visceral moment, that's what comes out. Like it's really, really coming from your very core, your very gut,
Yeah.
your very essence
Yes.
and being. You're squeezing a Jew like that. What comes out very naturally, like Miriam said, is your love of God. My begging and my pleading and my crying doesn't take it all away. I absolutely love you. I absolutely believe you. And I'm absolutely asking you to do this. I'm not saying the love is a bribe. It's just exactly what I'm feeling right now. Another hostage, just want to share. There's another hostage. There is, of course, many. The only other hostage I have this, I don't know him personally, but Hirsch Goldberg Poland, who's actually originally from Chicago. He's a 23-year-old boy. He was in the army. He's very peace-loving, so peace-loving that he asked to be switched. Instead of being a regular soldier, he was a medic in the army. So he worked in the army, but not fighting, because his whole nature was not fighting. He was at the festival. His left arm, which is his dominant arm, was blown off by a grenade. And last he was seen, he was being put on a truck that Hamas took to put the hostages on to schlep them from the festival over to Gaza. So my connection to him is that he and his family are neighbors of my brother-in-law who lives in Jerusalem, and neighbors, and he's very, very good friends of my nephew, who's also a 23-year-old boy. So he's very good friends of my nephew, and the families are my brother-in-law and sister-in-law are very close to this family as neighbors, fellow American Jews in Israel, similar style, very close. So after what happened, after what I saw happen with the hostages from Evanston, with Judith and her daughter Natalie, which of course on one hand, tremendous power, as we spoke of, was the joy and the confidence and thanking God before, but also mezuzahs were checked. Judith's mezuzahs were checked. They were all taken down. One was found to be not kosher. A kosher one was put up. Where Natalie often lives with her father, there were no mezuzahs. Mezuzahs were put there. So I was so affected. I said to my husband, we have to reach out to my brother-in-law, his brother, and we have to beg him to get his friends' mezuzahs checked. Like obviously they're in a very hard situation, but we just got someone got to take care of it. So we did. My husband reached out and I spoke to my brother-in-law, just really begging him, please, please, please get these mezuzahs checked. And he never told me the follow-up until today. I just found this out today. And this was, a few weeks ago. So he did, thank God. And he got a Chabad of the area that he knows involved. They came to the house. Obviously, Hirsch's parents were not, okay, just everything, happening then. They weren't knowing or expecting till they were at their door. They explained what they were doing. His parents agreed. They took down and checked all the mezuzahs. A number of them were defective, including the one on Hirsch's bedroom. And they also saw, they checked around the house and they found 2 places that did not have mezuzahs and could use them. They also checked Hirsch's tefillin, which also needed to be fixed. So thank God, at this moment, all of the mezuzahs are fixed. The 2 mezuzahs they didn't have are up, and his tefillin are fixed, which means the spiritual ammunition is in place, the spiritual protection. And I was like so grateful that that happened, because, you know, everyone could be like, I don't want to bother them. Who knows? I mean, even who knows what's happened to this person who was bleeding, so, you know, had suffered such a wound even before he got to Gaza. Who knows? But like, God, we are doing what you say works. So we know we will see him and all of them back. And I was so happy and grateful for all the people from the class that supported the same organizations I supported. Again, don't know them personally, but I found out people that are going around to check mezuzahs and to put up mezuzahs in all the families of the hostages. Because again, God, this is your system. This is what works. Mezuzahs protect, tefillin protects, lighting the Shabbos candle protects. In Hebrew, the acronym for lighting the Shabbos candles is neshek, the short version of the word for lighting the Shabbos candles. And neshek means ammunition. Because this is our ammunition. Our ammunition are the tefillin, our ammunition are the mezuzahs, our ammunition are the Shabbos candles. And we're God, we're doing it. And the whole world is doing your system. So, God willing, we expect to see miracles that are so big and so huge. We will all know it came from you. And at the same time, of course, we have the tragedies that we keep see happening of our children, our brothers, our sons killed. We see it. It's very, very, very painful. You see the pictures. It's so painful. These young boys that have their whole life ahead of them. It's very painful. And whenever we see that, we always remind ourselves that every single person who dies because they're a Jew, as in 1400, some people died on October 7th, who dies defending the land of Israel, as every Jewish soldier who has died defending the land of Israel. Everyone is called in Jewish thought a kadosh, which means a holy one, someone who dies sanctifying the name of God, and because of which that person goes straight to eternal afterlife without needing any cleansing, because such a death removes the need for any cleansing. It could be very difficult when you hear what's happening in Israel, when you hear what's happening in America. Crazy things we see happening in America cannot be pulled down by that. As we discussed, try not to read the news or stick to news that's not going to put you in a negative space. And very importantly, and I wanted to elaborate on this subject because it's a very, very important thing to really understand very deeply, understand it's all God. This is very, very important. It's all God. It's only God. There is only God. Because if you don't really feel that, this feels way too overwhelming. And you need to always, when you're starting to feel you're losing it, when you're overwhelmed, when you're scared, when you feel, but it's impossible, this is impossible, and this is impossible, and this is impossible, and any road that you look at, it just, you don't see a happy ending. You have to recenter. You have to realign. This is God's world. Everything is exactly God. Even evil people making evil choices. Evil people make evil choices. It's part of God's plan. And we have to keep thinking that and thinking that and thinking that until we feel safe and centered and confident. Yesterday, I was asked, how can we be so sure? How can we be so sure that it will all be wonderful? If you look in Tanakh, if you look in the scriptures, it speaks of God's enemies. These people are definitely God's enemies. They're definitely fighting God here. So how can we know the outcome? It's a battle, you know, like this or like this, who knows? I want to focus on this point because it's very important to understand. This vision, good versus evil, the great final battle of good versus evil is Christian theology, or it's Harry Potter. It's not Judaism. It's not Judaism. In Judaism, all is God, including evil. The evil inclination. Every one of us has an evil inclination, a completely evil spirit that tries to tempt us to do the wrong thing. We're probably familiar with its voice. That evil inclination is an angel doing a mission with an assignment from God to tempt us. Every spiritual force of evil is a power of godliness. Now, you could say, well, why does God do that to himself? Why does God do that to us? Why does God do that to his world? There's a lot of answers. Let's just say because this strengthens our muscles. This forces us to actually choose him, not as the obvious, the default option, but because, as we were saying about that woman, because of our love, because of our belief. I think of it as the weights, the swimmer who's training for a competition for the Olympics. They're training with weights, so when you take off the weights, you fly. So part of God's plan is evil. What Hamas did is part of the human condition that God set up. It's a horrible, corrupt, unfathomable part, but it's part. It's interesting to understand that anything that God forbids, on some level, human desires. If we didn't desire it, he wouldn't need to forbid it. So some incredibly sick, horrible things are forbidden by God, which means there's some sick, horrible things that some people desire. Not everyone, but some people, and some people more than others. And some people express it. And some people could talk about it. And some people have a horrific fantasy, and some people could do it. When the most unspeakable brutality is expressed, it makes things very clear. There's light and there's dark. Forget about gray. You see light, you see dark, make a choice. And people all over the world are making those choices. Obviously, as we have seen, both directions. It was amazing. This came out very shortly after October 7th. I don't know if anybody here saw it. I'm probably going to mess up his name. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is very high level in various fields, made an amazing plea to people that are following or tempted to follow this violence, this brutality, to support it. He says, don't be like my Nazi father. He's from Vienna. His father was a Nazi in World War II. He said, don't be a loser. People that become Nazis become losers. They're all losers. They're all people that don't know how to deal with themselves, so they join this evil empire as if through that they're going to gain power, as if through that they're going to gain esteem, as if through that they're going to heal themselves. You don't. You get destroyed by these evil empires. You don't get healed by them. You get used and abused. You don't get full. You get empty. It's an amazing talk he's giving. We saw today, not in the original video that he posted, but on a fan page for that video, 2.5 million views. That means 2.5 million people saw some of it at least. And it's like, here it is. Here's dark, here's light. Make a choice. I saw today there were farmers who looked like cowboys, obviously non-Jews, from Arkansas, from Montana, flying to Israel to help on the farms because all the farmers are now in Gaza fighting a war. So who's milking the cows? Who's watering the crops? So these American cowboy farmers from Arkansas and Montana are flying to Israel to take over their farms. You make a choice. There's dark and there's light. And every human being in the world make a choice. The darkness forces us to grow. Like all movement in this world. Movement in this world is against the force of gravity. We have to overcome the force of gravity to move. By Mashiach, by the redemption, it's like there's no gravity. There's no downward pull. Nothing's going to be fighting us. We're just propelled by our own momentum, like traveling in outer space. But this world is a world where right now there's darkness. And that darkness is the gravity that we soar by overcoming. That pushes us to work harder, that pushes us to overcome it. And the darkness makes choices very clear. And people all over the world, Jews and non-Jews, are making choices. So many examples saying, when I see these very liberal, very secular, very wealthy Jews and some non-Jews that are cutting their funding of millions of dollars, to the elite universities of America, to the highest thing in American society, the most significant, highest level prestige. People that have buildings named after them in Harvard University saying, we are no longer funding you. They're making a choice. And honestly, it's not our strat, it's not our issue, it's not our temptation. But if you're in that world, it's a very huge choice. And it's beautiful to see that. Anti-Semitism is not beautiful. But the outcome that we're seeing, the outcome of that anti-Semitism is beautiful. And maybe that is part of God's vision. And that's how we can look and say, God, it's all you. It's all your world. We know nothing, but you know exactly what you are doing. We don't, but you do. So I think that concept that I just took a few minutes to explain is very, very, very critical. And of course, this is all built on, for some of you, years and years and years of you absorbing these ideas, and for some of you, much less time. But each person, as deep as you can get in the concept, that's, I think, the place of the power and the strength. It's all God. We're clueless, but He is running the show, including when evil people make evil choices. They're making evil choices, but He doesn't take away God from running this world. And there's something beautiful that's going to come out of all this. I think another point that's important to remember when we're trying to stay focused and stay confident and stay positive is the more you do, the more you feel empowered and not powerless. Because if we don't do, we feel very powerless, very small, very weak. And when we do, we remember that we're very powerful. And there's sort of like two roads one can go. There's the roads of doing things spiritually, as we discussed last week. Chav and Rachel are on the same group. You don't need to be in a group saying Tehillim, saying Psalms, saying Psalms, saying Psalms. Yesterday, I kept seeing these emergency, like intense fighting is going on right now in Gaza. I just said more Psalms, and then I said more Psalms, and then I said more Psalms. And as I was saying the Psalms, I just kept envisioning like the words of the Psalms enveloping the soldiers, enveloping the hostages. Totally, unbelievably powerful protections for each and every one. Protections that no matter what happens to them, they're not affected. I saw a video today of a soldier. He was showing, he looked a little older. I think he's not just a regular soldier. And he was showing, he had a little picture of the Rebbe and like some microfiche of probably like something holy. And he showed on his shoulder, he had like a little pocket. And in the pocket, he saw, he was picking up the picture, he was showing his uniform, and he had this picture. It's a picture of the Rebbe, and it's a microfiche, which I assume is like probably all of Torah, something like that probably was on it. He didn't say what. And he said right there, he saw, he right there, he should have gotten very, very badly wounded. He said, it makes no sense. He said, obviously he was not wearing a kippah, he was not wearing a yarmulke, which means you wouldn't assume this person's religious. And he said, listen, you might not believe me, but it's personally happened to me. This piece of paper, this picture of the Rebbe, this, paper that has holy writings on it, it stopped it because I had it here. And as I said, I don't know how to explain it, but I did not get hurt at all. So when we are saying that to Tehillim, and I'm envisioning it as literally wrapping around the soldiers and wrapping around the hostages, protection of steel it is. And there's so many spiritual things. So many spiritual things we can do. Anything you can add. You know, one woman told me now she's covering her hair and charity, tefillin, anything for that God wants, you do, and you say, God, this is to protect a soldier. This is to protect the hostage. Just as when you're doing spiritually, and this gives you this very strong sense of we're not powerless. We've got the real power. Also doing things physically, like Chava was talking about the parade in Washington, buying for the soldiers or the hostages or the 250,000 families that are displaced and living in very nomadic situations right now, whole schools that were displaced. I mean, someone told me she bought like cases and cases of Play-Doh for the therapeutic school that was displaced and has no supplies, down to that level. Diapers, wipes, underwear. People have 250,000 people that right now have nothing. Buying, packing, shipping, so many physical things, which again, it gives you the same sense. I'm making a difference. What worlds am I turning over? I don't even know. Anything spiritually you can do and things that you can do physically. We have a lot of power. We can make a difference. Every single one of us. And if you have no clue what you can do, say another chapter of Psalms. Ultimate protection. My cousin has 2 children fighting. One in Gaza and one on the northern boundary. And I was thinking of her like over the Sabbath, like, oh my gosh, she has like no communication. Not that she has communication during the week usually either. And what that must feel like. I was speaking to her briefly afterwards, and she was like, you keep yourself busy and you pray. So we give charity and say Psalms, and every single one of us adding and giving God more. Will we ever know what miracle happened? We might hear about the miracle. Will we ever know it came from us? No, but that's okay. It's a selfless gift to the Jewish people. And that goes to my 5th point, which is keep celebrating the unity, keep celebrating the love, keep celebrating the renewed love for God that we see throughout the Jewish people, that also gives strength and confidence. So not listening to toxic things help. Focusing on the God end, doing spiritually, doing physically, and celebrating the beauty that we see now. Celebrating the unity, celebrating the love, celebrating the renewed love for God. And so many Jews, you see this. I saw today a clip of a soldier in Gaza. A soldier that never put on tefillin in his life. He's Israeli. He lives in Israel. I'm sure Chabad must have found him many times. He never put on tefillin in his life. And like they said, it's his bar mitzvah. He's putting on tefillin for the first time in Gaza. And so many others. A commander. He's not a 23-year-old. He's 54. And he served in many wars as a commander. And in all the wars, he never once put on tefillin. And now he asked a Chabad reservist, show me how to put on tefillin. For the first time, after all these years, after all these wars, being a commander of high rank in the Israeli army, it's the first time he felt the need. It's the first time he wanted to do this for protection and for God. If they're killing us because we're Jewish, we want to be Jewish. I know every week, we've been doing this every week, amazing. And every week we look at the Torah portion and we just see how it's talking about our situation. And I think that's a very important thing to stay focused on, because Torah creates reality. So when the Torah portion is again and again and again giving us these same unequivocal messages, we want to celebrate those messages and know that's what creates reality. So I know we've done this many times. I'm going to review it quickly and come to this week's. We know the opening Rashi, the opening commentary, and the whole Torah, Genesis, first verse, is they're going to say we're robbers. They're going to say we're colonizers. They're going to say we sold the land of Israel. We didn't. That's why the Torah starts with Genesis, with creation. It doesn't start with the first commandment, because we want to say strong, loud, clear, proud. Look in the Bible. God created the world. God gave Israel to the Jewish people. It's God's world. He gave this land to us. That's our mandate for this land. That's how it's our land. That's why we're not robbers. That's why we're not colonizers. It's God. He can give it to whoever he wants, and he gave it to us. That's the opening message, and that was the Torah portion of October 7th. The next week, Noah, as we know, that's where we see the word Hamas in Torah 13 times. The world has to be washed clean of the Hamas, of the violence, as we said, Rashi says of the robbery, and Onkelos says of kidnapping. Violence, robbery, kidnapping. That's as old as Torah, which preceded the world, defining what Hamas is. The next week was Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha is all about God promising Abraham the land of Israel for his children forever. God said, walk the land. You're conquering it with your feet. And his nephew was taken hostage. And when Abraham got the news, he did not go into negotiations. He did not try to give them bribes. He went and he fought and he freed every single captive, of which there were many, including his nephew. That was Lech Lecha. This past week's Torah portion was Vayera. Vayera, also so many things that were to me like every day, because every day I study a portion of the Torah portion of the week, and every day it was like, oh my gosh, this is it. So we have there the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and 2 other cities, with God raining down fire and sulfur from heaven. I'm like, yes, God, that's exactly what we want. You destroy the evil. Sodom and Gomorrah were the most evil cities, and God destroyed them. God, you've done it before. You destroy evil. Also, in last week's Torah portion, what we read in synagogue on Saturday, Sarah becomes a hostage. Sarah is captive. And God miraculously causes her freedom. I was like, that's it, God. You freed her. And I was also saying to Sarah, you know what it's like to be a hostage. You were actually twice. You come, you free, you can do it. And also, in last week's Torah portion that we read Saturday, beyond God destroying evil like Sodom and Gomorrah, beyond Sarah the hostage being miraculously freed, Sarah says to Abraham, kick out your son Ishmael, the father of the Arabs. Why? Because he wants to murder Yitzchak, the father of the Jews. Backstory, Ishmael was the first son of Abraham. He was 14 when Isaac was born. For 14 years, he's Abraham's son. He's Abraham's heir. And suddenly, Abraham's real son is born. Yitzchak, Isaac. And Ishmael's like the chopped liver. He's like, I don't want this. I don't want this kid. I don't want this baby. I don't want this upstart. I want like he used to be. Like, I thought I was his heir. I thought I was his real kid. I didn't know I wasn't exactly. And he tried to murder him. Ishmael tries to murder Yitzchak, the father of the Arabs, trying to murder the father of the Jews. And Sarah says, get rid of him. He can't be with my son. He's going to kill him. And Abram doesn't know what to do. It is his son, after all. He's supposed to just throw him on the streets. And God said, listen to what Sarah is saying. It's not a jealous, overprotective Jewish mother. No. What she's saying with divine spirit. Listen to what Sarah is saying. You have to drive away Ishmael to protect Yitzchak. You have to drive away the father of the Arabs to protect the father of the Jews. And that was the Torah portion we read Saturday. And this week's Torah portion, 2 things, and as I skimmed it on Sunday, 2 things struck me very strongly: the opening and the closing. I'm sure there's stuff in the middle as well, but what struck me was the opening and the closing. The opening of this week's Torah portion is Abraham purchasing land in Israel. Abraham purchasing Hebron. What happened? Sarah passed away. And Abraham wanted to purchase a burial plot for her. And the person that owned this land said, oh, you don't have to buy it. We're such good friends. I'll give it to you as a gift. Abraham said, no, thanks. No free presents. I don't want, in other words, that tomorrow or in a few tomorrows you come and say, this isn't yours. This is mine. I'm paying hard cash for it. I'm paying a very high price. You talk about we're such good friends. You give me to me free, and then you charge me a very high price. And I'm going to pay that very high price because this is my land. That was the opening of this Torah portion, this week's Chayei Sarah. The closing. It's very interesting because in studying Torah, there's a rule. Everything follows the conclusion. Whatever the conclusion of something is, that final word, that's the final word. So the final word, literally, not like exaggerated, literally the final word in this week's Torah portion is that Ishmael, again, Ishmael is a father of the Arabs. Talking here not about him personally, actually talking about all of his family and descendants, are fallen. That's the word used in Hebrew, nofal, nofel, which means fallen. So what does this mean? They're fallen. So Rashi, classical commentator we've mentioned many times, first he says this word could mean dwell. And then he says, no, but I mean, if he means dwell, why don't you use the word dwell? Why does it use the word fallen? Because as long as Abraham was alive, Abraham, Ishmael's father, he was okay. But once Abraham left, he was fallen. That's it. Kaput. He's fallen. The final word in the Parsha, in the Torah portion, is fallen. And the final words of the Rashi is also saying Ishmael is fallen. I was like, okay, Torah creates reality. We're supposed to live with the time. We're supposed to live with the Torah portion. And surely this Torah portion is creating reality. I just wanted to quickly share, every day I hear miracles. I don't know who does and who doesn't. So I know every week we've shared miracles. I try not to share the same ones. Forgive me if I did, because sometimes I forget what I said what to. But I try, because there's so many I hearing constantly. I'm just trying to share different ones. I know I couldn't have told you this, but I just heard this one Saturday night. A woman told me. She spoke to the man that was involved in the story. She heard from him. There's a woman that lived on one of the kibbutzim, one of these settlements in the south. Totally not religious settlement and totally not religious woman. But her brother, the one who tells the story, is Chabad. And her brother for years has been trying to get her to put a mezuzah, again, as we keep mentioning, mezuzah's protection, trying to put a mezuzah on her doorpost. And she never said no, but she never said yes. And she lives on a completely secular settlement. It's not like they really have mezuzahs there. So it would be a little bit overt. But she doesn't say no. She says later. And he had this conversation with her. It's like one of these running conversations for years, literally years. Friday, October 6th. He's speaking to her on the phone, wishing her a good Shabbat, a good holiday. And she agrees to put up the mezuzah, which already she had. And he's showing her exactly how to put it up to make the blessing. She has the mezuzah up. That was Friday, October 6th. October 7th, they attack her settlement viciously, going from house to house, bombing, burning, shooting up. They come to her door. Well, obviously, like every other person, she had locked her door and she was inside, locked in whatever her bomb shelter was, but didn't stop them from any other door. They come to her door. They tried her obviously locked door. They, for some reason, tried a minute or two, and they left. And they never came back. Makes no sense. They didn't burn her house. They didn't bomb her house. They didn't shoot up her door. There was mezuzah. It was a locked door, and they left. I think I might have mentioned this to you, I don't remember, but I saw another situation where a woman who was with her children in one of these settlements where these barbarians, freedom fighters, were going from house to house, creating freedom by massacring and butchering and doing the most savage, barbaric acts. And she's alone with her children in one of these settlements, and she has nothing to defend herself with but the knives of their kitchen. She gives each child a knife, and she says, God, if you spare us, we will keep your Shabbos. Okay, completely secular family. We will keep the Shabbos. And they skipped her house. They went to the house on one side of her. They went to the house on the other side of her. They went up and down her street many times, and they never once approached her door. I saw her being interviewed and her saying, and we keep the Shabbos now. One more, there was a family on a kibbutz. Again, this is a kibbutz. This is all of these settlements were generally very secular kibbutz. And the woman of the family started becoming more and more interested in religion, and they started doing more and more. They still were basically a secular family living in a secular kibbutz, secular settlement, and the woman wanted to keep the Shabbos. But it wasn't just her, it was her husband, and small children. And they tried it, but it's really hard to keep Sabbath, keep the Shabbos when everyone else in your settlement, it's Saturday. So it didn't work. So what they started to do was they would leave for Shabbos. He had religious relatives, she had religious relatives. Every Shabbos they went somewhere else. They did this for 2 years. For 2 years, they're never home on Shabbos. Shabbos, Saturday, October 7th, they were home. Why were they home? Because she's very pregnant. And it's just too hard to travel. And she's like, okay, one Shabbos, we'll be here. It's not a big deal. They invited guests. We're not going to be alone, just us on this whole kibbutz with no sense of Shabbos. We have guests, and together we'll celebrate the holiday and the Shabbos. So they were on that settlement on October 7th. And again, the Arab butchers come in and going from door to door, and they and their guests are in their house, in their bomb shelter, and they hear and see through the slits the Arabs going, house next to them, walk past their house and go to the house after them. And they saw that whole day Arabs going on the street, up and down, into houses. More and more horrific acts were done, and they never come to their house. And they're like, what's going on? They don't even come into their house. Afterwards, they found out what happened, because a number of the terrorists, of course, were killed, and they found on them lists that Arabs that came from Gaza and would work in this settlement, where the people were so nice to them and gave them good wages instead of the pennies they would earn in Gaza, where every week they would give them candies for their children. These people made up lists and maps of the whole settlement. By each house, they wrote down father, mother, if there were children, ages of children, number of children. If there were dogs, they wrote that down. They wrote down which houses you should murder and which you should take hostage. And by her house, they wrote, never home Saturday. So that Shabbos protected them, even though they were there. Never home Saturday, not worth it. I know I went over time, but I thought it was really, it's important to hear and share the miracles. It's important to celebrate them. It's important to know God is doing them, to know we are worthy. We are so worthy now, and we need and are and must do more and more to create the spiritual arsenal that is making all of us, not individually, the entire Jewish people worthy. That God will not only resolve the seemingly impossible, unresolvable, but we trust him. He's going to resolve the situation in the best way. But not just that. That he's going to do much more. Like we discussed last week, that this should be the fulfillment of the messianic prophecy of Isaiah. If you remember that verse I showed you last week, that they, the Jews, will conquer together. They will fly. You remember us. It's unbelievable, right? Rashi said from land and from air, together. Together we're so united, and together because if you're following the information we're receiving, there's a tremendous coordination between the air and the land. The people on the land are telling the people in the air exactly where to shoot and where to send those missiles and bombs. And together, coordinated land and air, we will conquer the Plishtim, the Palestinians on the western coast. And then we should continue with the rest of the prophecy, the rest of the verse, and receive from their own volition, from their own will, all the lands east on the Transjordan, the Canaanite, the Kenizi, the Kadmoni, everything we discussed and explained last week, we should receive all those lands with a complete revelation of Mashiach now. So what we're doing is amazing. We should all keep up the amazing work. We should keep it up with joy. We should keep it up with confidence. We should keep it up knowing we are the spiritual brigades and we are doing an amazing job all over the world, all of us together. And we should rejoice and see what we are creating. The enormity of the miracles that should flow and be the miracles of redemption. Thank you.